Not only did they share with us the importance of faith and family, they also shared with us the importance of being economically stable, especially my maternal grandfather. He was not only the pastor of two churches, but he was also a businessman. And on my paternal side of the family, one of my father's uncles emphasized the importance of having money for a rainy day and investing. And his name was Uncle Stephen Gary on my dad's side of the family. So it was like faith, family, and being economically stable. My name is JoAnn Shannon Short. I was born in Richmond, Virginia, and I still live here. I was born on January 16, 1957. I grew up in the West End also, near Bird Park. Later on, I lived in the, what you would call the VCU area, or the Fan District of Richmond. The particular street that I grew up on was called Maplewood Avenue, and it was a lot of families with children on that street, and we would hang out together, the children on the block on Maplewood Avenue, and we had a ball. We would hang out, of course, until just before it got dark, because when the street lights were going off, it was time to go in the house. We had to. But we had a lot of fun. We played a lot of makeshift games, hide and go seek, jump roping, you name it, riding your bicycle, you name it, we did. We were not too far from Bird Park. And Bird Park area, the block that we lived on was definitely African American. The streets surrounding us were other people from different races lived. At about 5 years old or 6 years old, my siblings and I went to live with my mother's parents. And so that was a Fan District. But that was an African American neighborhood also. I would say on Morris Street, African Americans. On that part of Carey Street that ran adjacent to Morris Street, African American. However, Harrison Street, which was much closer to VCU, it was a mixture of different races. My mom, she was very family orientated. She loved to cook. In fact, when we were still living on Maplewood Avenue, she would cook some very good home cooked meals. We loved them. And of course my dad did too. And of course my brother, was 5 of us. We loved to eat. That good cooking was passed down from her mom, my grandmother Florence Brown. Both of my grandparents played a major vital role in our upbringing, on my dad's side as well as my mom's side. The Shannons, granddaddy Shannon and grandmother Shannon, also helped to raise us, as well as my mom's parents. So it was like a village. And both grandparents were heavily in the faith. We had to go to church every Sunday. It was not an option. The Shannons worshiped at Fifth Baptist Church, which is on Curry Street in the West End, which was not too far from Second Baptist Church, where my mother and her parents worshipped at. And Second Baptist Church on the corner of Idlewood and Randolph. They probably were about 5 blocks away. And of course, we were brought up to believe in the Most High God. My grandfather, Shannon, was a deacon, and grandmother Shannon was a deaconess at Fifth Baptist Church. And my mother's father was a pastor, And of course, my grandmother on my mother's side was the first lady of two churches in the country. My mother, she was also a singer. In fact, some said that they thought that she may be another Marian Anderson. So she was on the way to be a concert singer. However, she chose to be a mother. So when she was growing up until getting married, she sang. She still sang, but what I would say, not necessarily professionally, because she saw her role as a mother taking priority over being a professional singer. She grew up in the church singing, but it seemed like her career could have led to her becoming a concert singer, but she chose being a mother, a wife and a mother. My mother loved to sing, so she would sing while she was doing household chores, and she always instilled in us the importance of praising the Most High God. So she, even though she was a concert singer, she would just strike up a tune on her own, start off of a song, and it may be, people may be familiar with the words one way. She would end up adding her own words to them as they, would fit to what was going on in her life. You know how the old folks would sometimes start a song, and then all of a sudden they're ad-libbing because they were remembering some things in their life, and that would help them to make it through some things. My mother's name is Doris Brown Shannon. Here is Amanda Bolden McLeod. For me, it would be my great-grand, but
for me,
for you it would be your great-great-grandmother, and for you it would be great-great-great-grandmother. Amanda Bolden McLeod Shannon. So basically, the Shannon family is from South Carolina, for the most part. Her maiden name was Bolden. She had a son named Moses, with a white man named Thomas McLeod, and that's where the McLeod comes in. And then she later on went to marry a William Shannon, who happens to be your great-great-granddaddy, because that's my great-granddaddy, William Shannon. So that's where the Shannon comes in.
Okay. Who was Papa's grandfather?
Right.
Okay.
My great-grandfather, your great-great-grandfather, and then your
great-great-great-grandfather.
She is 90 years old. She turned 90 this past January the 3rd. The Shannon family, we can trace back as far as 1852. That would be the matriarch, Amanda Bolden McLeod. The Shannon family is from South Carolina.
You know how the Shannon family found their way to Richmond?
That's interesting you asking that question. Because I don't know the details. My granddaddy, Shannon, and my grandmother Phyllis lived together in Borkins, South Carolina. My grandfather was a deacon at one of the churches there, and my grandmother was a deaconess. However, I'm not 100% clear on why they left, and so I'm gonna take the liberty, knowing the some of the things floating through my family tree. I would say that my grandmother and grandfather saw Richmond as a better place to raise their family. There are 5 Shannon children from my father, Charlie Lee Shannon, and Doris Brown Shannon. I am the middle child. I am who most of my siblings consider to be the peacemaker of the group. If you were to hear my siblings tell the story, and they probably would say I still am the peacemaker. My daughter said, yes, I am. Naomi, Ruth Shannon, my youngest sister, and my younger brother, Michael Ellis Shannon, and then me, and then my brother, one of my oldest brothers, Wilson Edward Shannon, who, by the way, was named after my grandfather on my mother's side, and the oldest of us, Charles Lee Shannon, who, even though his name is Charles Lee Shannon, they call him Charles Lee Shannon III because they wanted to make the connection with my great grandfather and my daddy, whose name was Charlie Lee Shannon. There's a little story behind that. My mother, she didn't have a problem with the first, because he was the firstborn. In most families back then, the firstborn son was usually named after the daddy. And my mother said, not my son. The name Charlie to her had a negative connotation to it. She said, but it's okay to name him Charles because she remembered part of the history of her husband's history. One of his uncles' name was Charles Lee. My father's name is Charlie Lee Shannon II.
This is wonderful. And so this is my mom and her siblings.
Yeah.
Which is really good. I like that picture. That's a classic picture. And then this is my mom when she graduated from Virginia Union.
And graduated in 1996.
With my sister and my mom's mom and my brother there.
Yeah,
and
my father transition. I have that adventurous traveling bug inside of me. And my father knew that. We would actually take a lot of bus trips together to visit Shannon members that lived in the Upper East Coast, like D.C., Maryland area. And it would be just the two of us there, my dad and I. We would travel together by bus, Greyhound bus. I was daddy's girl. Well, there's a picture of him where he's holding Melody when she was a little girl. And wow, it's profound. By the way, he called Melody Black Beauty. He would refer to her as Black Beauty.
Where did you go to college?
I followed the traditional family trail, Virginia Union University. However, I went 2 years after I graduated from the Mighty Green Dragons, Maggie L. Walker High School. I went from 1975 to 1977. I left. I got married. And I returned back though. So I got off the path a little bit because I seem to have forgotten that you can still be a wife and a mother and still pursue your dreams. So that came back to me. And so I went back in 1994 to complete my degree at Virginia Union University. I was not only married and had children, I was also working. I started off part-time, and then I was moved by one of the administrators in the financial aid office who remembered me when I was there in the 70s. And she said, well, she remembered me as Shannon. She said, Shannon Short. I said, you married now. If you could maintain your grade point average that you had in the 70s, we probably could find you some scholarship. Yes, I was offered a full scholarship at Virginia Union when I graduated from Maggie L. Walker. However, I chose to stay at home instead of the campus. I went from being a part-time student to a full-time student with the support of the Most High God and my husband and my children. They worked with me. So I was majored in education and minored in English in the 90s. I became a full-time teacher in the Richmond public school system. I also, at the same time, was the director of Christian education at Shalom Baptist Fellowship Church, so it was twofold. 3 of my siblings and I are graduates of Virginia Union University. My youngest sister chose to go to a technical college. And then the other connection is my uncle, my father's youngest brother, became president of Virginia Union University from 1979 to 1985. So that would be was my granddaddy's Shannon, so that would be your great-granddaddy's Shannon.
Oh, so that was Papa's father?
Yes, and then your great-grandmother.
So that's Papa's
Mother.
father?
Right.
So this is Yaya's grandmother?
Right, Phyllis.
and Yaya's grandfather on her father's side.
Right. Now, don't ask me whose house, because it doesn't seem like it's their house. But because they were digging this, you know how back in the day they met. Different administrators of a church would meet at each other's homes and have meetings sometime. And especially if they knew that person could cook.
You said they were deacons?
Yeah, my grandfather was a deacon.
I didn't know her name was Phyllis, so was your cousin
Yes,
Phyllis
she
named
was.
after her?
Yes, and back in the day they would name
After the
their children after someone in the family.
Where did you attend church as a child? And then where did you attend church as an adult? And tell me a little bit about the role that the church has played in your life.
I attended Second Baptist Church, which is located on the corner of Ottawa and Randolph in the West End, that's near the Bird Park area. And going to church was not an option. It was mandatory. I attended church not only on Sundays, Wednesdays for Bible studies. They had choir rehearsals and, of course, Sunday school. So on a typical Sunday, I and my siblings, we were in Sunday school, church, and if there was a after church service, we were there also. When I grew up to become an adult, I attended Shalom Baptist Fellowship Church, which is located on Harwood Avenue in the south side part of Richmond, Virginia. Matter of fact, in what you would call a redeveloping and housing development area, Hillside Court. My brother was moved to pastor there. He and I both remembered, well, all of my siblings, we remembered how the village helped us to shape us. And so we were blessed to have both set of some children, some young people don't even have one set of grandparents. We were blessed to have two sets of grandparents to mold us. Both of my sets of grandparents knew the importance of worshiping the Most High God and being obedient to Him. Like I said earlier, church was not optional. Every Sunday we would be in church. On my maternal side, my grandfather happened to be the pastor of two churches in the country, one in New Kent County and another one, New Vine Baptist Church in Charles City County. And of course, my grandmother was the first lady of both. My grandparents on both sides, paternal as well as maternal, instilled in us that the value and importance of following Jesus Christ and His principles, and that they will help us to maneuver in this world. And during the time that my siblings and I were growing up, of course, that was considered the civil rights era. And so we know as a people, we weren't always respected. And so my grandparents on both sides knew the importance of if we followed the lessons, the parables of Jesus Christ, then we would know how to interact in our communities. And we would know how to not just take the racism or the injustice that's brought on us, but to learn how to stand up for justice. And they saw Jesus Christ as showing us how to do that. A lot of people may think that Jesus Christ was all about just turning the other cheek, where we were taught by my grandparents in the church that we attended that there was a time for everything. There was a time to turn the other cheek, which means to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But then there was also a time to take a stand for justice. And they saw that if we kept our hands in the Father's hand, that we'll know when to do which one. My maternal grandparents were Dr. Reverend Wilson E. Brown. One of my brothers, Wilson, was named after. And my grandmother's name was Florence Gilliam Brown. My paternal grandparents were my granddaddy was Charlie Lee Shannon. And my grandmother's name was Phyllis Gray Shannon. Not only did they share with us the importance of faith and family, they also shared with us the importance of being economically stable, especially my maternal grandfather. He was not only the pastor of 2 churches, but he was also a businessman. And on my paternal side of the family, one of my father's uncles emphasized the importance of having money for a rainy day and investing. And his name was Uncle Stephen Gary on my dad's side of the family. So it was like faith, family, and being economically stable.
Do you think that you've been able to pass those values on to your own children?
Yes, definitely the faith and the family. It took me a while to embrace the economic concepts that both grandparents were trying to instill in us. But I finally embraced it. And of course, my daughter Melody happens to be, how would you say, the flag runner of that, being the businesswoman that she is. So I learned how to embrace it too. Sometimes we as people of faith seem to forget that there's nothing wrong with having wealth monetary. I'm remembering Abraham, from the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You could say Abraham was a minister. His family was one of the richest family in the biblical life. The father has no problems with you having a lot of money. It's what you do with that money that he blesses you with. And and for those who know the story of Abraham, he used it wisely. His wealth he shared with his family, and it was used to accomplish things that the father wanted him to do. And so I say that to say, if the father blesses you with a lot of money, use it wisely. And definitely if you use it for his purpose, the purpose that he has called you for, you would be blessed abundantly. I was considered a tomboy. My grandfather on my mother's side was a little bit worried about that, being the Baptist minister and having that, back in the day, the woman is supposed to be very feminine and certain things they should do and certain that type of thing, which he eventually outgrew, bless his heart, before he transitioned on. However, he would look at my grandmother and say, she's outside all the time. My sister, on the other hand, shadowed my grandmother, Florence Brand. I would come in and everything from hanging out with my brothers and the others, children on the block, and Grandma, what you doing? She said, oh, I'm making some biscuits, or I'm frying some chicken, or whatever she was doing, she would let me know. And I would pause and watch for a while. But I don't think my grandfather thought that was long enough, right? However, my grandmother, the wise woman that she was, she knew I was taking it all in. And I was always make sure I was there when she finished baking a cake, to be there to lick it. And I said, ooh, Grandma, ooh, this is good. What you put in this? And she would tell me. Now, keep in mind, my sister's sitting there just shadowing. If you're a shadower, you're going to get everything. So later on, when I was married, I could cook now. My grandfather, I made sure I invited him to dinner. He was surprised. So Grandma knew I was soaking it in. I was, it was like a sponge. When I would come in and everything to get some water, get something to drink, to get something to snack on, I was absorbing what I saw then. And it was going inside of me. Now, the baking part, my sister has both of them down pat. I have the cooking down, but the baking, I'm pretty good at the pies. But the cakes and the bread, the homemade bread and all that, my sister has it. And she claimed that she's no longer doing that anymore. I said, well, and my oldest brother, and I said, wait a minute, hold up. You can't give that up until you pass it along. Which she has my niece, Jasmine, seems to have that gift. Legacy to me means leaving things that are important or very valuable to succeed in this world that we live in. I consider faith and family, the importance of having faith and family, and how to control your destiny as a legacy to leave. with my children, grandchildren, and other young people. I think one of the reasons why our young people fall by the wayside or stray away from that path, the right path, is because there's a lot of values that have not been instilled in them, whereas in our family they were instilled in us, the value of faith and family and controlling your destiny. You don't have to work as hard as our ancestors or our parents or grandparents did. However, you look to the principles of God to lead you on how to go about doing this. And so if young people have not been taught these values, then how are they going to go out and pursue them? They may not even know who God is, who Jesus Christ is. They may, if they have not been introduced to them, they may have been introduced to some things that are not of God, which is not good. Having a legacy is very important, and that's what I'm praying that more and more of our young people will learn that, so they in turn will lead that or instill that in their children, and then they in turn will instill that in their children, and then wow, we will have a people that have come back to the Most High God. We living in a generation, some people are trying to bring us back to those quote unquote goody boy days. And something else is pulling up in my spirit right now. One of the reasons why I think our young people may not be following the ways of Jesus Christ is because they may not have been taught the whole full concept of who Jesus Christ was. There are some people of other races that want us to believe that Jesus Christ would always turn the other cheek. And that's not true. If you actually do a very good study of your Bible, and now what's coming up in my spirit now is my grandfather, Wilson Brown, would always say, study to show yourself approved. And that is not just for pastors. It is also for us, the lay people. It's not just for the educators also. And when we go into actually reading and studying that Bible for ourselves and not relying on someone else to tell us what thus said God or what were the principles that Jesus Christ walked in, because he was sent here to model how to follow God, his own Father, I know that our young people will have acquired the tools that they need to combat people that are not for justice or racist. They will know how to do it in a godly way. Jesus Christ and just always turn the other cheek. And unfortunately, some of our young people don't know that. But he did it in a way that was pleasing to the Most High God when he stood up for what was right.